Imagine this. In the sleepy village of St. Mary Mead, a twisted killer strikes, turning innocent nursery rhymes into deadly blueprints for murder. First, a crooked man found mangled by a winding path, then a spider's victim poisoned in her parlor, a butcher silenced forever, a queen robbed of her tarts and her life, a fiddler's tune cut short by venom, an egg-like scholar shattered from his wall, and a shepherd mauled under the moon, who is orchestrating this eerie spree. Why do the rhymes hide long-buried secrets of betrayal and revenge? Enter Miss Jane Marple, the unassuming sleuth unraveling the web one verse at a time. But as the bodies pile up, will she expose the shocking mastermind before the final rhyme claims her? Dive into the suspense your heart will race from the first whisper. Chapter 1. The Crooked Man's Shadow. The train rattled into the sleepy station of St. Mary Mead just as the autumn sun dipped behind the rolling hills, casting elongated shadows that danced like mischievous sprites across the platform. Miss Jane Marple stepped down lightly, her sensible shoes clicking against the weathered wood. At 70-something, she moved with the quiet assurance of someone who had unraveled more knots in life's tapestry than most could imagine. Her niece, Joan West, had insisted on this visit, something about needing a sharp eye for the village's growing peculiarities. Joan, ever the artist, had painted a vague picture in her letters, odd thefts, whispered feuds, and an air of disquiet that clung to the hedgerows like morning dew. A carriage awaited, driven by young Tommy, the estate stable hand, whose freckled face beamed under a cap too large for his head. Miss Marple. A pleasure, ma'am. Mrs. West says, you're just the tonic for our troubles. His voice carried a lilt of excitement, as if escorting an elderly lady were the highlight of his week. Troubles, Miss Marple echoed, settling into the cushioned seat. As the horse clopped forward, she adjusted her knitting bag on her lap, fingers itching to begin anew. Scarf knitting always helped her think. Tommy glanced back, his eyes wide. Oh, nothing dire, ma'am. Just ... folks acting queer. Old Mr. Hargrove down at the mill swears someone's been tampering with his locks, and Mrs. Pritchett claims her prize roses were snipped in the night. Village gossip, mostly. Miss Marple nodded, her keen gaze absorbing the landscape, thatched cottages huddled together, smoke curling from chimneys, and the distant spire of St. Mary's Church piercing the twilight sky. St. Mary Mead had changed little since her last visit, yet an undercurrent tugged at her instincts, like a loose thread in a well-woven shawl. The West Estate loomed ahead, a rambling manor of ivor-clad stone, its windows glowing warmly. Joan greeted her at the door, arms outstretched, and Jane, you look remarkably well. Come in, the kettle's on, and I've saved you the best scones. Over tea in the sunlit parlour, Joan unfolded her concerns. It's not just petty mischief, Aunt. There's a tension here, like a storm brewing. Raymond, my husband, you remember, thinks it's all nonsense, but I've heard rumours of anonymous notes, threats, even. And now, Sir Reginald Blackwood, the landowner up at Blackwood Hall, has been acting strangely reclusive. Miss Marple sipped her Earl Grey, her mind cataloguing details. Sir Reginald, wealthy, widowed, known for his iron-fisted control over the village lands. Anonymous notes, you say? How intriguing. Do tell me more. Joan leaned forward, her voice dropping. One was slipped under our door last week. It said, "The crooked path leads to ruin." Cryptic, isn't it? Raymond laughed it off, but I can't shake the feeling it's connected to the old feud with the Hargroves. Sir Reginald once accused them of poaching on his estate. As the evening deepened, Miss Marple retired to her room, unpacking her few belongings. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of wood smoke and damp earth. She peered out the window at the winding lane that snaked toward the villager path locals called the Crooked Mile. For its serpentine twists around ancient oaks, sleep came, fitfully interrupted by a distant clamour just before dawn. Shouts echoed from the grounds below. Miss Marple rose swiftly, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders, and hurried downstairs. Joan was already at the door, pale-faced, with Raymond beside her, lantern in hand. "It's Sir Reginald," Raymond said grimly. "Tommy just rode in from the village. They found him, dead, out by the mile marker on the Crooked Mile. The scene at the mile marker was a tableau of chaos under the grey morning light. Villagers clustered in hushed groups, their breaths misting in the chill. Constable Pock, a stout man with a moustache like a hedgehog, cordoned off the area with makeshift rope. Miss Marple approached quietly, her presence noted but not questioned her. Reputation as a keen observer preceded her. Sir Reginald Blackwood lay sprawled beside the weathered stone marker, his body contorted in an unnatural pose, limbs twisted at odd angles, as if he'd been wrung like a dishcloth. His face, frozen in shock, stared skyward, and a trickle of blood marred his temple. Nearby, the mile marker itself leaned crookedly, its inscription faded, 1 mile to St. Mary Mead. Miss Marple knelt carefully, ignoring the damp grass soaking. Her hem, poor man, what a dreadful way to go. She noted the absence of footprints in the mud save for a single set leading away into the wood sand, a peculiar indentation in the earth, like the press of a walking stick. Constable Pock cleared. "His throat looks like a fall, Miss Marple. Tripped in the dark, perhaps. He was known to walk this path at odd hours, fretting over his boundaries. But why twisted so?" She murmured, more to herself. Her eyes caught a glint, a silver cufflink half buried in the soil, engraved with an ornate bee. Blackwood's, surely. Yet something nagged like the nursery rhyme her old nanny used to chant. There was a crooked man, and he walked a crooked mile, ... Double quotes. Joan pulled her aside. "Aunt Jane, this is awful." Sir Reginald was abrasive, but murdered. "Here, not a fall," Miss Marple said softly. "Look at his neck bruised, as if strangled first, then posed. And that marker, ... It's been shifted recently." Word spread like wildfire through the village. By midday, the West Parlour buzzed with visitors. Mrs. Pritchard, the rose enthusiast, clutching a handkerchief. Mr. Hargrove, the miller, his hands flowered, and even the vicar, Reverend Hale, offering solemn prayers. Over afternoon tea scones forgotten in the sombre mood, Miss Marple steered the conversation deftly. "Tell me, Mr. Hargrove, where were you last night? I understand there was bad blood between you and Sir Reginald." Hargrove bristled, his bushy eyebrows knitting. "Bad blood, eh? He claimed I diverted the stream for my mill, cutting his fields dry. But I was home, mending sacks till midnight. My wife can vouch." Mrs. Pritchard chimed in, her voice quavering. "And I, tending my greenhouse. Those roses don't prune themselves. Sir Reginald once trampled my border in a rage over some boundary dispute, but I'd never ... Double quotes. The vicar nodded gravely. "I was in my study, preparing Sunday's sermon on forgiveness. Ironically fitting now. Raymond West, ever the skeptic, poured more tea. Alibis aplenty, but motives too. Sir Reginald foreclosed on half the village farms last year, made enemies like weeds in spring. Miss Marple listened, her needles clicking rhythmically as she knitted. Each story wove a thread. Hargrove's grudge over water rights, ruined garden show entry, the vicar's hushed argument with Blackwood about church tithes, yet none rang full solid, if convenient. As the group dispersed, Tommy lingered, fidgeting with his cap. Miss Marple, Mum, I saw something odd yesterday. Sir Reginald arguing with a stranger by the pub. Tall fellow, city clothes, hat pulled low. A stranger. Her interest piqued. Describe him, dear. Tall, lanky, with a limp. Heard M mention debts and payment due. Sir Reginald looked furious, shoved a paper at him. Intriguing. Miss Marple thanked Tommy, her mind worry. Evening fell, and she ventured to Blackwood Hall, escorted by Constable Pock. The manor was a Gothic sprawl, echoing emptiness. Blackwood's study revealed chaos, drawers rifled, papers strewn. Robbery, Poke suggested. Perhaps. Miss Marple sifted through the debris, her gloved fingers pausing on a sealed envelope tucked behind. A portrait. It was addressed to the crooked one, in elegant script. Inside, a letter. Your sins bend the path you walk. The mile ends soon. Repay what you stole, or twist in the wind. Unsigned, but scented faintly with lavender Mrs. Pritchett's favourite. Bloom Poke's eyes widened. A threat. This changes everything. Back at the West Estate, over a late supper of cold ham and pickles, Miss Marple shared her find. Joan gasped. Long-buried grudges. Sir Reginald's father swindled half the village in a land deal decades ago. Could this be revenge? Raymond stroked his chin. The stranger, Tommy Soper, perhaps a hired hand, or an heir sniffing around. The village exhaled a collective breath that night, whispers turning to relief. The killer, an outsider, drawn by old debts, not a neighbour's hand. Lanterns flickered out one by one, doors bolted tighter, yet Miss Marple sat by her window, knitting in the moonlight. The crooked mile stretched below, shadowy and inviting. The rhyme echoed in her thoughts. He bought a crooked cat, which caught a crooked mouse, ... double quotes. This was no end, merely the first bend. A hidden letter hinted at deeper roots, grudges festering. Like weeds, the fog rolled in, thick and secretive, promising more shadows to chase. As the clock struck midnight, a distant owl hooted a warning, or merely the night. Miss Marple smiled faintly. Tomorrow would bring fresh threads to unravel. Chapter 2. The spider's parlour trap. The morning mist clung to St. Mary Mead like a gossamer veil, softening the edges of the village's grief over Sir Reginald Blackwood's twisted demise. Miss Jane Marple, fortified by a breakfast of toast and marmalade, set out for the Rusty Anchor. The local innware whispers of the previous night's tragedy swirled like steam from a teapot. Joan had mentioned a curious detail over breakfast. The inn's proprietress, Miss Clara Tuttle, had received one of those cryptic notes days before, tucked into a guest book with the words, "The spider waits, the fly is near." Miss Marple, curiosity, sharp as her knitting needles, urged her to investigate. The Rusty Anchor stood at the village's heart, its timbered facade weathered but welcoming, with ivy curling around diamond-paned windows. Inside, the air smelled of polished oak and fresh-baked bread, undercut by a faint tank of nervous anticipation. Clara Tuttle, a wiry woman with a penchant for starched aprons, greeted Miss Marple with a strained smile. "Miss Marple, a pleasure." Despite the circumstances, Tea. Or perhaps something stronger after everything. Tea will do nicely, Clara, Miss Marple replied, settling into a corner table near the hearth. The inn was quiet, save for a few regulars nursing pints and muttering about the crooked man's fate. Her eyes swept the room, noting the gleaming brass candlesticks, a faded tapestry of a huntsman, and a guest-book open on the counter. Its pages slightly askew, Clara poured from a chipped teapot, her hands trembling slightly. "It's dreadful, isn't it?" First, Sir Reginald, now folk are saying it's no accident. And those notes, I showed mine to Constable Pauke, but he says it's likely a prank. Miss Marple's gaze softened, encouraging confidences. "May." "I see it, dear." Clara hesitated, then retrieved a folded scrap from her apron pocket. The note, written in the same elegant script as the one found at Blackwood Hall, read, "The spider waits. The fly is near. Step lightly, or be caught." No signature, but a faint smudge of ink suggested a hurried hand. "Curious," Miss murmured, her fingers tracing the paper's edge. "And who was staying here when you found it?" Clara glanced around, lowering her voice. "Just the usual lot, Mr. Finch, the travelling salesman, and old Miss Daphne Grimsby, who's been here a month, writing her memoirs. She's a bit of a recluse, always in her sitting room with her books and that dreadful curds and whey pudding she insists on." Miss Marple's interest piqued at the mention of Miss Grimsby. Joan had described her as a sharp-tongued spinster, once a governess with a knack for unearthing secrets. Might I speak with her? A chat could shed light. Clara nodded, leading Miss Marple upstairs to a cosy sitting room off the main hall. The door creaked open to reveal Miss Daphne Grimsby, a frail figure swathed in black lace, her silver hair pinned tightly. A bowl of curds and wheys sat on a side table, its sour scent mingling with lavender water. A single candle flickered, casting spiderweb shadows across the walls. "Good morning, Miss Grimsby," Miss Marple said brightly, taking a seat uninvited. "I'm Jane Marple, visiting my niece. I hear you're quite the chronicler of village history." Daphne's eyes, sharp as cut glass, appraised her. "History, yes. Gossip, never. What do you want, Miss Marple?" "I'm no fan of idle chatter." "Nor I," Miss Marple replied, her tone disarming. "But I'm puzzled by these notes plaguing the village. Clara showed me hers quite poetic, don't you think? Reminds me of a nursery rhyme. Little Miss Muffet, perhaps." Daphne's lips twitched, but before she could respond, a choking gasp escaped her. She clutched her throat, the bowl of curds and whey clattering to the floor as she slumped forward. Miss Marple sprang up, calling for Clara, who rushed in with a cry. The room filled with the inn staff, their panic a discordant chorus. "She's gone," Clara whispered, checking Daphne's pulse. The old woman's face was ashen, her lips faintly blue, a bitter almond scent lingering in the air. Miss Marple knelt beside the body, her heart heavy but her mind racing. "Poison," she said softly, noting the spilled bowl's contents. The curds were flecked with an unnatural sheen, and a folded note lay beneath the table. Its script unmistakable. The spider sat, the fly was caught. Beside it, a torn scrap of fabrica shawls, fringe, vivid green. Unlike anything Daphne wore, Constable Pauke arrived, his notebook already open. "Another one. This is madness, Miss Marple. First Blackwood, now Miss Grimsby. What's this about a spider?" Miss Marple pointed to the note. "A pattern, Constable. Nursery rhymes, each tied to a death. Sir Reginald was the crooked man, and now Miss Grimsby, our Miss Muffet. But why her? And how was the poison delivered? The inn became a hive of activity as Polk questioned the staff. Clara swore the pudding was prepared fresh that morning, untouched by anyone but herself, Mr. Finch. The salesman claimed he'd been out peddling his wares, while the cook, a nervous girl named Lily, admitted to leaving the kitchen unattended briefly to fetch milk. Miss Marple, meanwhile, examined the sitting room. The candle was low, suggesting Daphne had been up late. A stack of papers, her memoirs revealed scathing accounts of village scandals, including a decades-old affair involving Sir Reginald's father and a governess. Could Daphne have been that governess, harbouring secrets worth killing for? As dusk settled, Miss Marple joined Clara for a quiet moment in the inn's kitchen. "Tell me, Clara, who delivered Miss Grimsby's meals?" "Lily, mostly," Clara said, wringing her hands. "But yesterday, Miss Grimsby insisted on fetching her own tray. Said she didn't trust anyone after that note arrived." Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. "And did anyone visit her recently?" Clara hesitated. "Well, Mr. Finch stopped by her room 2 days ago. Said he was offering her a new fountain pen for her writing. She sent him away, though called him a nosy peddler." Intrigued, Miss Marple sought out Finch, finding him polishing his boots in the common room. He was a wiry man with quick eyes and a salesman's grin. "Miss Grimsby, sad business," he said, shaking his head. "I only offered her a pen. She was prickly, but harmless. Did you see anyone else near her room?" Miss Marple pressed, her tone gentle but probing. Finch paused, then leaned in. "Now you mention it, I saw a lad Tommy from the West Estate lingering by the stairs yesterday. Looked shifty, but I thought nothing of it." Miss Marple thanked him, her mind turning to Tommy's earlier tale of the stranger arguing with Blackwood. Could he know more? She resolved to question him later, but first she returned to Daphne's room, now sealed by Polk. Slipping inside with Clara's reluctant permission, she found a hidden drawer in the writing desk. Inside was a forged invitation to a non-existent village meeting, dated the day before, luring Daphne to stay in her roomer, perfect trap. By evening, the village gathered at the church hall, summoned by Reverend Hale to quell rising fears. Miss Marple stood at the back, observing. Clara recounted the poisoning, her voice breaking, while Finch offered loud sympathies. Tommy, fidgeting near the door, avoided her gaze. Addressing the crowd, Miss Marple spoke calmly. Miss Grimsby's death was no accident. The forged invitation kept her isolated, ensuring the poison reached only her. Someone knew her habits, her love for that peculiar dish. Murmurs rippled through the room. Mrs. Pritchett clutched her handkerchief. But who would do such a thing? She was just a harmless old woman. Harmless. Mr. Hargrove snorted. Her memoirs were a powder keg. She wrote about my father's ruin, blamed Blackwood's family. Maybe someone wanted her silenced. Miss Marple nodded, revealing the invitation. This was crafted to deceive. Whoever wrote it knew Daphne's mistrustful nature. And this green thread, does anyone recognize it? Silence fell, broken only by Clara's gasp. That's from Lily's shawl. She was wearing it this morning. All eyes turned to Lily, who burst into tears. I didn't do it, I swear. I lost my shawl yesterday, left it in the laundry. Anyone could have taken it. The crowd softened, and Miss Marple raised a hand. Lily's innocent, I believe. The shawl was planted to mislead us, but we're closer to the truth. As the meeting dispersed, the village exhaled. Reassured by the unmasking of the forged invitationer, small victory against the creeping dread. Yet Miss Marple lingered, her gaze on the green thread in her pocket. It matched nothing in Lily's wardrobe, but she'd seen a similar shade in the market, on a scarf sold by a passing trader, and Tommy's shifty demeanour nagged at her. Back at the West Estate, Joan poured cocoa, her eyes wide. "Aunt Jane, this is chilling. 2 deaths, both tied to rhymes. What's next?" Miss Marple sipped her drink, the firelight dancing in her eyes. "The spider's web is wide, Joan, but every thread leads somewhere. Tomorrow will follow the next." Outside, the wind whispered through the village, carrying the echo of a rhyme. Along came a spider and sat down beside her. The trap was sprung, but the spinner remained hidden, waiting. Chapter 3. The Butcher's Silent Belth. The village of St. Mary Mead awoke to a sky bruised with storm clouds, the air heavy with the promise of rain. Miss Jane Marple, undeterred by the gathering tempest, sat at the breakfast table of her niece, Joan's estate, her knitting needles clicking softly as she mulled over the grim pattern emerging. First, Sir Reginald Blackwood, twisted beside the crooked mile. Then Miss Daphne Grimsby, poisoned in her parlour, a victim of the spider's trap. Each death echoed a nursery rhyme, and the village's veneer of tranquillity was fraying like an old tapestry. Joan, pouring tea, voiced the question on everyone's mind. "Aunt Jane, what's next? It's as if the rhymes are taunting us." Miss Marple's eyes, sharp behind her spectacles, gleamed with quiet determination. "A pattern, Joan, is a map. We need only follow it. I'm off to the village. Today Mr. Hargrove mentioned something about the butcher, Mr. Tolliver, being unsettled. Perhaps he's received a note too." The butcher's shop, nestled between the bakery and the cobbler, was a squat building with a red and white awning, its windows fogged with condensation. A brass bell above the door usually chimed cheerily, but today it hung silent, as if holding its breath. Miss Marple stepped inside, greeted by the sharp scent of raw meat and sawdust. The shop was empty, save for Mr. Jasper Tolliver behind the counter, a burly man with a ruddy face and hands scarred from years of wielding a cleaver. His usual joviality was gone, replaced by a nervous twitch as he polished a knife. "Good morning, Mr. Tolliver," Miss Marple said, her tone warm but probing. "I trust you're well, despite recent events." Tolliver's eyes darted to the door. "Well enough, Miss Marple, though the village ain't what it was. Sir Reginald, then Miss Grimsby. Folk are scared to buy chops, thinking I'm next." "Why you, dear?" she asked, feigning surprise, though Joan had mentioned Tolliver's heated row with Blackwood over unpaid debts for a banquet. He hesitated, then pulled a crumpled note from his apron. "Found this slipped under my door 2 nights ago. Didn't think much of it till now." The note, in that now familiar elegant script, read, "3 men in a tub, but only one sinks. The bell tolls for you." Miss Marple's pulse quickened. 3 men in a tub was from Rub-a-Dub-Bub, a rhyme she recalled from childhood. "Have you enemies, Mr. Tolliver? Or perhaps debts?" His face reddened. "Sir Reginald owed me for months big order for his last hunt. Threatened to ruin me if I pressed him. But I'd never." He stopped, glancing at a back door leading to the alley. Before Miss Marple could press further, a scream shattered the stillness. It came from the alley, raw and desperate. She followed Tolliver as he bolted outside, where Lily, the inn's cook, stood trembling, pointing at a heap beside the butcher's water barrel. There lay Jasper Tolliver, his own cleaver buried in his chest, blood pooling on the cobblestones. Above him, the shop's outdoor bell used to signal deliveries hung motionless, its clapper missing. Constable Pock arrived swiftly, his boots splashing through puddles as the first raindrops fell. Villagers gathered, their murmurs drowned by the storm's growing rumble. Miss Marple knelt beside the body, ignoring the damp seeping into her skirt. Tolliver's eyes were wide with shock, his fingers clutching a brass button, its edge stamped, with a tiny anchor. Not his, she murmured, noting his plain shirt. The alley was a mess of mud, but a single set of boot prints large, with a distinctive hobnail pattern, led toward the village square before the rain blurred them. Pock scratched his head. Another rhyme, Miss Marple. This is no coincidence. But why Tolliver? He was a good sort, debts or no. Perhaps, she said, he knew something dangerous. Her gaze lingered on the silent bell, its absence of sound as telling as a scream. The village convened that evening in the rusty anchor's common room. Rain lashing the windows. Clara Tuttle served mulled wine, her face pale. First Sir Reginald. Then Miss Grimsby, now Jasper. It's a curse, I say. Miss Marple, seated near the fire, listened as accusations flew. Mr. Hargrove, the miller, slammed his tankard down. Tolliver was in deep with that gambler from London, saw them arguing. Last week, bet he owed more than he let on. Mrs. Pritchard, her rose-scented handkerchief fluttering, added, and he was cosy with that salesman. Finch, always whispering in corners. Finch, polishing his glasses, bristled. Whispering, I bought sausages, nothing more. You lot, see. Shadows everywhere. Miss Marple interjected gently. Mr. Tolliver received a note, like the others. Did anyone see someone near his shop last night? Lily, still shaken, spoke up. I saw Tommy Mrs. West's stable hand by the alley yesterday evening. He was carrying a sack, looked heavy. I thought he was delivering feed. All eyes turned to Tommy, who flushed crimson. I was dropping off grain for the butcher's horse. I didn't see nothing, I swear. Miss Marple's smile was reassuring, but her mind catalogued his unease. Tommy had been near every crime, the Crooked Mile, the inn. Now the butcher's. Yet his youth and earnestness suggested fear, not guilt. She needed more. After the meeting, she visited Tolliver's shop with Poke's permission. The back room was cluttered with meat hooks and ledgers. A locked box, pried open, revealed a gambling chit from a London club, marked with Tolliver's initials and a staggering sum £500 owed to a J. Carver. Beside it, a torn page from a child's book depicting Rubed Dub with a butcher, baker, and candlestick maker in a tub. A single word was circled in red ink. Butcher. This was no random killing, Miss Marple said to Poke. Tolliver's debt made him a target. But the rhyme suggests a deeper intent. Someone's orchestrating this. Poke frowned. Carver, eh? Sounds like that stranger Tommy mentioned, the one with the limp. Miss Marple nodded, recalling Tommy's tale of the city man arguing with Blackwood. We must find him, and this Whodunit's from a naval coat, not common here. As night fell, the storm raged, battering St. Mary Mead with unrelenting fury. Miss Marple returned to the West Estate, where Joan and Raymond waited, anxious for news. Over a supper of shepherd's pie, she shared her findings. Raymond leaned back, sceptical. A gambler from London. Sounds like a stretch. Tolliver was. Probably just in the wrong place. Joan shivered. But the rhymes, Raymond, they're deliberate. Aunt Jane, what's the next line? The baker, he, Miss Marple, raised a hand. Let's not leap ahead, dear. The killer wants us to follow the rhymes, but we must look where they don't expect. She retired to her room, spreading her knitting across the bed. The brass button gleamed under the lamp, its anchor motif a clue from afar. She recalled a naval officer who'd visited the village years ago, linked to Blackwood's family through a disputed will. Could Carver be connected? And the torn book page, why leave it, unless to taunt? The storm's howl masked a softer sound, a creak on the stairs. Miss Marple paused, listening. Nothing followed, but her instincts prickled. She tucked the button into her knitting bag and opened her window, peering into the rain-soaked night. The village lay quiet, its secrets buried under the deluge by morning. The storm had passed, leaving a cleansed but wary St. Mary Mead at the church hall. Miss Marple shared the gambling chit's discovery, easing fears of a random killer. Mr. Tolliver's debt was settled in blood, she said, but the killer's hand is steady, their plan precise. We've unmasked one motive, but the rhyme's rhythm continues. The villagers dispersed, clutching hope like a fragile talisman. Yet Miss Marple lingered, her gaze on the horizon. The baker, the candlestick maker, more players in this grim nursery game. And somewhere a book's torn pages waited, their verses a map to the next tragedy. Chapter 4. The Queen's tart heist. The rain had retreated, leaving St. Mary Mead glistening under a hesitant sun, but the villager's heart beat uneasily. 3 deaths, Sir Reginald Blackwood, Miss Daphne Grimsby, and Jasper Tolliver, reached tethered to a nursery rhyme, had woven a net of dread round the cobblestoned lanes. Miss Jane Marple, sipping tea at her niece Joan's estate, felt the weight of the pattern pressing like a storm cloud. The latest clue, a brass button with an anchor motif, hinted at an outsider's hand, yet the rhyme suggested a mind intimately familiar with the village's pulse. Joan, slicing a loaf of bread, broke the morning silence. Aunt Jane, it's as if the killer's playing a game with us. What's next in that wretched rhyme? Miss Marple's needles paused mid-stitch. Rub-a-dub-deb ends with the candlestick maker, but I suspect the killer's not so predictable. The notes, each one's a breadcrumb leading us deeper. Her mind turned to the mayor's wife, Mrs. Evelyn Hartley, a woman known for her prize-winning tart and a temper to match. Joan had mentioned Evelyn's recent spat with Blackwood over a garden boundary, and whispers of another note had reached the estate, determined to follow the trail. Miss Marple set out for the Hartley residence, a grand house on the village green, its garden a riot of roses and trellises. Evelyn, a statuesque woman with a crown of auburn curls, greeted her at the gate, her smile tight. Miss Marple, what a surprise. I'd offer you a tart, but I'm afraid my pantry's been raided again. Raided? Miss Marple's eyes twinkled with interest as she followed Evelyn inside. The parlour was a shrine to domestic pride. Lace doilies, polished silver, and a glass case displaying ribbons from county fairs. Yet the air held a faint edge of unease, like a note played off-key. Evelyn sighed, sinking into a velvet chair. Last night, someone stole my raspberry tarts, my best batch, meant for the church fundraiser, and this was left behind. She handed Miss Marple a note, its script as elegant and chilling as the others. The Queen bakes her tarts, but the knave takes her heart. Miss Marple's pulse quickened. The Queen of Hearts, she murmured, recalling the rhyme's tale of stolen tarts and a knave's deceit. When did you last see your tarts, Mrs. Hartley? Yesterday evening, Evelyn replied, her voice sharp. I left them cooling in the kitchen. This morning, Gone along with my silver tart tray. I'd blame that scoundrel Finch, the salesman, but he was at the inn all night, or so Clara says." Miss Marple nodded, filing away Finch's name. His frequent appearances near each crime were no coincidence, yet his alibis held firm. "And your husband, the mayor, was he home?" Evelyn's lips pursed. "George was at a council meeting. Till late. He's been distracted, what with the village, in a panic. Says it's bad for his re-election." Leaving the Hartley house, Miss Marple strolled the green, her mind tracing connections. The tart's theft felt deliberate, a prelude to something darker. As she passed the church, a commotion erupted near the vicarage garden. A crowd had gathered, their gasps rising like a flock of startled birds. Constable Pock pushed through, his face grim. "Miss Marple, you'd better see this." In the vicarage garden, beneath a trellis heavy with late-blooming clematis, lay Evelyn Hartley, her auburn hair fanned out like a halo, her hands clutching a handful of crushed raspberry. Tarts, their red juice staining her dress like blood. Her throat bore faint bruises, and her eyes stared blankly at the sky. Beside her, etched in the soft earth, was a single line: "The Queen is no more." Miss Marple knelt, her heart heavy but her gaze sharp, strangled like Sir Reginald. She said softly, "But the tarts, they're a message." She noted a single tart, uneaten, its edge dusted with a powdery substance, sugar, or something sinister. A glint caught her eye, a silver hairpin engraved with a tiny rose, half buried in the soil. Poke shook his head. "This is madness, Miss Marple. Evelyn was well liked, tarts or no. Who'd do this?" "Someone who knows the villagers' secrets," she replied, pocketing the hairpin discreetly. "And the rhyme's perhaps not a thief, but a killer." The village descended into chaos, with whispers of curses and vengeance. By afternoon, the church hall brimmed with anxious faces. Reverend Hale, his voice trembling, called for calm. "We must trust in justice, not fear." Mrs. Hartley was a pillar of our community. Miss Marple, standing at the back, listened as accusations flew. Mr. Hargrove, the miller, pointed a flowery finger. Evelyn was feuding with Mrs. Pritchett over that garden show. Pritchett's roses lost to Evelyn's tarts last year. She never forgave her. Mrs. Pritchett gasped, her handkerchief fluttering. "How dare you? I was pruning my roses all evening, as Lily can attest. I'd never harm Evelyn, even if she was insufferable about those tarts." Clara Tuttle, wringing her apron, added, "And what about that stranger? Tommy saw him near the green yesterday, skulking by the vicarage." Tommy, hovering near the door, flushed. I was just passing through, delivering eggs to the vicar. The man had a limp, like before, looked angry, muttering about debts unpaid." Miss Marple's mind whirred. The stranger possibly J. Carver, the gambler. Linked to Tolliver's death, kept surfacing, a shadow threading through each crime. But the hairpin nagged at her. She'd seen Evelyn wear one like it, yet this one felt out of place, as if planted. After the meeting, Miss Marple visited the vicarage, where Reverend Hale was tending his garden, visibly shaken. "Miss Marple, this is a dark day. Evelyn was here yesterday, planning the fundraiser. She seemed preoccupied." "Did she mention anything unusual?" Miss Marple asked, her tone gentle. Hale hesitated. "She spoke of a letter, not one of those notes, but something personal. Said it was from an old friend, begging forgiveness. She burned it in my hearth." Intrigued, Miss Marple examined the vicarage fireplace. Among the ashes lay a charred fragment, its script barely legible. regret my part in the theft. The word theft echoed the rhyme's nerve, but whose confession was it? Returning to the Hartley house, Miss Marple gained entry with Poke's permission. The kitchen was pristine, save for a smudge of flour on the counter not Evelyn's, who prided herself on tidiness. A search revealed a hidden drawer in the pantry, containing a ledger of garden show winnings. One entry stood out, a payment to a Miss L. Baxter, dated years ago, for consulting on preserves. Baxter name tied to Blackwood's. Old land swindle mentioned in Daphne Grimsby's memoirs. That evening, over a quiet dinner of roast chicken, Miss Marple shared her findings with Joan and Raymond. The killer staged the tarts to fit the rhyme, but the hairpin and flowers suggest carelessness. And this Miss Baxter, could she be our stranger's accomplice? Raymond frowned. Baxter, that's ancient history. She left the village after Blackwood's father ruined her family. You think she's back for revenge? Joan shivered. And the rhyme, Aunt Jane. What's next? Miss Marple's eyes gleamed. The knave's theft is solved, but the Queen's heart remains a mystery. We've caught a glimpse of the killer's hand, but their face stays hidden. The village slept fitfully that night, doors bolted against the unseen knave. At the church hall, Miss Marple had revealed a ledger, pinning the theft to a past grudge, easing fears of a random spree. Mrs. Pritchett, tearfully cleared of suspicion, confessed to a jealous outburst but swore her innocence. The community clung to this resolution, a fragile thread of hope, yet Miss Marple sat by her window, the hairpin in her hand. Its rose motif matched one sold at the market, where Finch had been seen bartering, and the flower perhaps from Hargrove's mill. The rhyme's rhythm pulsed on, its next verse waiting in the shadows. Chapter 5. The fiddler's fatal tune. The sun broke through the clouds over St. Mary Mead, casting a golden haze that belied the village's deepening shroud of fear. For death's now stained its idyllic facade. Sir Reginald Blackwood by the crooked mile, Miss Daphne Grimsby in her spider's parlour, Jasper Tolliver with his silent bell, and Evelyn Hartley amid her stolen tarts. Each a macabre verse in a killer's nursery rhyme symphony. Miss Jane Marple, lingering over a late breakfast of poached eggs and toast at Joan's estate, felt the threads tightening. The brass button, the charred letter fragment, the flower smudgel, pointed to a tapestry woven from past sins and present vendettas. Raymond West, her nephew-in-law, paced the room, his pipe unlit. Aunt Jane, this can't go on. The mayor's calling in reinforcements from the county, but you're our best hope. Miss Marple's smile was faint, her knitting a steady rhythm. Hope lies in observation, Raymond. The village fete today, it's a perfect stage for the next act. I recall the fiddler, Mr. Elias Reed, boasting of his tunes at last year's event, and with the rhymes skipping ahead, Hey Diddle Diddle might be next, the cat and the fiddle. Joan paled, setting down her teacup. Elias, he's harmless, a wandering musician who settles here each summer. But he did quarrel with Evelyn over unpaid fees for her garden party. Intrigued, Miss Marple donned her hat and ventured to the village green, where the fete was in full swing despite the pall of tragedy. Booths brimmed with jams, knitted scarves, and apple-bobbing tubs. Children laughed, oblivious to the adults. Strained whispers. The air hummed with the scent of cotton candy and hay, undercut by a tension like a bowstring drawn taut. Elias Reed stood on a makeshift stage, his fiddle tucked under his chin, drawing lively reels that coaxed dancers onto the grass. He was a lanky man with wild grey hair and eyes that sparkled like polished coins, his fingers flying over the strings. Approaching after his set, Miss Marple offered a polite nod. "Mr. Reed, your music lifts the spirits on such a somber day. Might I have a word?" Elias wiped his brow, his smile broad but fleeting. Miss Marple, the sleuth herself. "Aye, music's my balm against the darkness. But these killings? I got a note yesterday, slipped into my fiddle case." He produced it, the script eerily familiar. The cow jumps high, the dish runs away. "Your tune ends tonight." Miss Marple's heart skipped. "Hey, diddle diddle," she confirmed softly. "Have you crossed paths with the victims? Any shared melodies or grudges?" Elias chuckled ruefully. "Grudges, Tolliver owed me for a gig. Blackwood called my playing caterwauling, and Evelyn shortchanged me. But I'm no killer. I play for joy, not vengeance." As the afternoon waned, the fete reached its peak with a maypole dance. Elias returned to the stage, his bow drawing a merry jig. The crowd clapped along, the village momentarily forgetting its woes. But midway through, Elias faltered, his notes souring into a discordant wail. He clutched his throat, the fiddle clattering to the boards as he collapsed, foam flecking his lips. Above the stage, the church, Wather Vena stylized, cow-creaked. In the breeze, casting a long shadow over his twitching form, screams erupted, the fate dissolving into pandemonium. Constable Pock shoved through the throng, his whistle shrill. Miss Marple reached the stage first, her gaze sweeping the scene. Ilias's bow lay nearby, its horsehair glistening unnaturally, and his water flask spilled, its contents reeking of bitter almond cyanide again. Etched on the stage floor in faint chalk was a moon shape, echoing the rhyme's leaping cow. "Poisoned," Miss Marple murmured to Poke, "likely in the bow resin or the flask." But how administered amid the crowd? She spotted a crumpled sheet of music nearby, its notes annotated with cryptic symbols. Crescendo's marked debt, diminuendo's laybald pay. The village retreated to the safety of homes as evening fell, but Miss Marple convened an impromptu gathering at the vicarage, where Reverend Hale offered weak tea and stronger prayers. Clara Tuttle, her in bustling with frightened lodgers, arrived first. Elias was at the Rusty Anchor last night, playing for tips. He argued with that salesman, Finch something about a faulty violin string Finch sold him. Finch, summoned reluctantly, fidgeted with his cup. A misunderstanding. He claimed the string snapped too easily. I refunded him. End of story. Mrs. Pritchett, her roses forgotten, added, and Elias was sweet on Lily from the inn. Saw them whispering by the maypole earlier. Jealousy, perhaps. Lily, blushing furiously, shook her head. We were just talking music. He taught me a tune on his spare fiddle. I'd never harm him. Mr. Hargrove, dusting flour from his sleeves, grunted. Elias knew about my old gambling debts, overheard me at Tolliver's. Threatened to tell if I didn't hire him for the Mills harvest dance. Miss Marple listened, her mind piecing the puzzle. Each suspect wove a motive, but the music. Sheet nagged. She examined it closer under the vicarage lamp. The annotations formed a code, symbols matching those in Daphne Grimsby's memoirs. Ledger of village blackmail. As the group debated, Tommy burst in, breathless. Miss Marple, I found this near the stage, dropped by a man with a limp. He held a vial, its label faded but readable. Rosin adhesive Finch's finest. All eyes turned to Finch, who paled. I sell rosin, yes, but anyone could have bought it. I was in the crowd, not backstage. Poke nodded. True, but your alibi's thin. And that stranger with the limp, you've been seen with him, Finch. Finch stammered. He's a supplier. Carver, from London. We do business in notions and strings. Nothing sinister. Miss Marple's voice cut through the tension. Business. Perhaps, but tied to Ilias's blackmail scheme. This sheet music, it's a cipher for demands. Elias was extorting villagers, using secrets from his travels. Someone turned the tables. The room fell silent, then erupted in confessions. Hargrove admitted paying Elias to stay quiet about his debts. Pritchard revealed a hushed affair Elias had witnessed. Even Reverend Hale confessed to a minor embezzlement from church funds, silenced by the fiddler's threats. Lily, tears streaming, added, "He told me about it last night, said he was quitting the game, burning his ledger." But someone must have known. Miss Marple revealed the decoded sheet, names and sums, including Carver, £200, revenge plot. Elias was Carver's partner, perhaps. The poison was in the rosin applied backstage during the break. Finch, your vial implicates you, but the chalk moon was drawn with a left hand, yours is right. Finch exhaled in relief, but Hargrove shifted uncomfortably, his left-handed grip on his teacup evident. Yet Miss Marple shook her head. No, the killer's cleverer. Tommy. You found the vial conveniently, and your sightings of the limping man, always alone. Tommy bolted for the door, but Poke barred it. Under pressure, Tommy cracked. It was Carver. He made me plant clues, said Elias. Double-crossed him on a big score. I didn't kill, just helped. Miss Marple nodded sadly. Helped enough. The blackmail ended with Elias, but Carver's the shadow pulling strings. With Tommy detained, the village breathed easier that night. The Fates tragedy resolved as a blackmailer's downfall. Carver's name sent to county police for pursuit. St. Mary Mead clung to this closure, lanterns flickering like hopeful stars. Yet Miss Marple sat by the fire, the music sheet in hand. Carver's limp echoed the crooked man, his web spanning all victims. The rhymes dish and spoon waited, their flight a harbinger. Outside, a distant fiddle's ghost note whispered on the wind. Chapter 6. The eggs shattered crown twilight draped St. Mary Mead in a veil of uneasy calm. The village green still littered with remnants of the ill-fated fate, crumpled ribbons, forgotten stalls, and the echo of Elias Reed's final, poisoned melody, 5 lives extinguished, each a twisted verse in a killer's macabre anthologist's, Reginald Blackwood's crooked fall, Daphne Grimsby's ensnared end, Jasper Tolliver's muted toll, Evelyn Hartley's pilfered sweets, and now Elias is silenced. Strings. Miss Jane Marple, returning to her niece Joan's estate under a canopy of stars, felt the weight of unresolved harmonies pressing upon her. Tommy's confession had unraveled Elias's blackmail web, pointing fingers at the elusive Carver, the limping gambler from London whose shadow loomed over every crime. Yet Carver remained a ghost, his motives a cipher wrapped in nursery lore. Over a supper of leek soup and crusty bread, Raymond West voiced his frustration. Aunt Jane, Tommy's in custody. Carver's name is with the authorities. Surely this ends. The spree, the village needs peace, not more rhymes. Miss Marple's eyes, reflecting the candlelight, held a deeper concern. Peace is fragile, Raymond, like an eggshell. The rhymes leap erratically. Next could be Humpty Dumpty, a fall from grace. I've heard whispers about the schoolmaster, Mr. Desmond Quill, a man perched high on his pedestal of knowledge. Joan leaned forward, her artist's hands sketching idle patterns on the tablecloth. Quill, He's the head of the village school, strict but brilliant. He judged the essay contest at the fete yesterday Elias played during the awards. Quill disqualified a pupil for copying, caused quite a stir. The connection sparked in Miss Marple's mind. Quill, with his lofty ideals, might be the next egg teetering on the wall. She resolved to visit the school at dawn, before the bell summoned the children. The village schoolhouse stood on a gentle rise, its stone walls crowned by a low parapet where Quill often paced, pondering lessons. As Miss Marple approached, the morning mist parting like curtains, a child's cry pierced the air. Pupils clustered below the wall, their faces upturned in horror. There, atop the parapet, lay Desmond Quill, his skull cracked against the stone, limbs splayed like a broken marionette. Blood pooled beneath his head, and shards of what appeared to be eggshell scattered around him, deliberately placed. Their white fragments glinting in the sun. Constable Polk arrived on his bicycle, out of breath and flustered. Miss Marple, you're always a step ahead. Quill looks like he slipped during his morning constitutional. But those eggshells, odd for a man allergic to hens. Miss Marple examined the scene, her gloved fingers brushing a shard. Etched faintly into one piece was a verse. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. Nearby, Quill's spectacles lay shattered, and a loose stone on the wall suggested tampering. Not a slip, Constable. Pushed, perhaps, after a blow. And this note in his pocket. She unfolded it. All the king's horses can't mend what's broken. Your crown cracks tonight, Pock whistled low. Another rhyme. Quill was at the fete, judging. Those essays. Maybe a disgruntled parent. The school buzzed with activity as teachers herded children inside. Miss Marple lingered, questioning the head boy, young Oliver, a bright lad with freckles and a stutter. Mr. Quill was effin' yesterday, but he was upset about the contest. Said someone cheated. Bibbit wouldn't say who. Intrigued, Miss Marple requested the essays. In Quill's cluttered office, amid stacks of books and inkwells, she found the entries. One stood out. A vivid tale of village history by Eliza Hargrove, daughter of the miller. Its prose mirrored passages from Daphne Grimsby's unpublished memoirs, plagiarized. No doubt by midday, the village gathered at the school hall, parents murmuring like a flock of uneasy birds. Reverend Hale offered a prayer for Quill, his voice echoing off the rafters. Miss Marple addressed the crowd, her tone measured. Mr. Quill's death fits the pattern, a fall engineered to mimic Humpty Dumpty. But why him? Perhaps his judgment unearthed secrets better left buried. Mr. Hargrove shifted uncomfortably, his wife beside him pale. Our Elisa won fair and square. Quill was biased, always favoured the mayor's boy. Mrs. Pritchett, ever the gossip, interjected, biased. Quill caught Eliza copying from old Grimsby's notes. He was going to expel her, ruin her chances for the county scholarship. Eliza, a gangly girl of 14 with braids, burst into tears. I didn't mean to. Papa said it was just inspiration. Mr. Quill found out and called me in after the fete. He was going to tell everyone. Miss Marple's gaze softened. And did anyone overhear this confrontation, child? Eliza nodded, sniffling. Lily from the inn was delivering lunch, and that salesman, Finchy, was fixing the school clock nearby. Finch, present in the hall, cleared his throat. Clock, the mechanism jammed. Heard Quill ranting about integrity. Cracked like an egg. Thought it was teacher talk. Clara Tuttle added. Lily mentioned Quill arguing with someone on the phone last night. Sounded like threats about a past mistake. Miss Marple filed these away, her mind turning to Carver. Quill's allergy to eggs made the shells a pointed taunt, and the etched verse suggested premeditation. She visited the Hargrove mill, where the air hummed with grinding stones and the scent of fresh flour. Mr. Hargrove greeted her warily, wiping his hands on his apron. "Miss Marple, this is a bad business." Quill was a stickler, but murder. Eliza's innocent, she'd never push him. Perhaps not, Miss Marple agreed, but plagiarism is a crack in one's character. "Tell me, did Quill know of your gambling debts?" Elias Reed did, and now he's gone. Hargrove's face drained of colour. Quill, ... He tutored me as a boy, knew my family's ruin from Blackwood's swindle, threatened to bar Eliza if I didn't confess to the village council. A motive emerged. Silence. A judgmental voice. But Hargrove's alibi-milling grain till dawn with witnesses held firm. Miss Marple departed, pausing by the mill stream where a discarded eggshell floated, its surface unmarked but suspicious. Afternoon brought her to the inn, where Lily busied herself with trays. "Mr. Quill, he was kind, taught me reading. But yesterday, he seemed scared," said someone from London called, demanding old papers. "Old papers," Miss Marple echoed. Quill's office had yielded a locked box, now in Pock's custody. Inside, faded documents from the Blackwood land scandal, implicating not just Sir Reginald's father, but Quill himself as a young clerk who forged signatures for a cut. The revelation spread like ripples in a pond. At an evening vigil in the church, candles flickering against stained glass, Miss Marple shared the forgeries. Quill's crown was his reputation, shattered by his own past. The killer used it against him, lured him to the wall with a promise of redemption, then struck. Accusations flew. Finch, with his London ties, denied knowing Quill's history. Mrs. Pritchett confessed to lending Grimsby's memoirs to Eliza for research. Reverend Hale admitted Quill confided in him about the calls from Carver. Seeking absolution, young Oliver, the head boy, tugged Miss Marple's sleeve. "Miss, I saw a man with a limp by the school last night. He gave Mr. Quill a package looked like eggs." Poke perked up. "Carver again. And the expulsion Hargrove. Your daughter's fate sealed Quill's." Hargrove hung his head. "I argued with him, but I left him alive. Eliza... She sneaked out, said she begged Quill to reconsider. Eliza, confronted, sobbed. I climbed the wall. To talk, he slipped when I startled him. It was an accident." But Miss Marple shook her head. "No, dear, the blow came from behind, and eggshells were placed after. You were manipulated, perhaps, by the package, laced with a note. The package, recovered from Quill's office, contained hollow eggs with hidden microfilm, proof of the forgeries. Carver's fingerprints. No, but a scent of pipe tobacco remnants. Brand, no, Finch's. Finch bolted, but villagers blocked him. Under interrogation, he confessed. Carver hired me to deliver threats, stir chaos, but I didn't kill, just planted clues to frame others." Miss Marple nodded. "Framed, yes. The plagiarism scandal was the bait, drawing Quill out. But the true culprit is Carver, tying all to the Blackwood swindle. Quill's expulsion of Eliza was the final straw for Hargrove, but he didn't act. Hargrove admitted pressuring Eliza to cheat, but the push came from elsewhere. Lily, quietly, revealed, I overheard Carver at the inn. He said Quill's silence on the forgeries was breaking. He planned the fall. With Finch detained as an accomplice and a warrant for Carver issued, the village exhaled. the plagiarism resolved. With Eliza's community service instead of expulsion, mending trust in the school's walls. Quill's past forgiven in death, his legacy as educator intact. Yet Miss Marple wandered the schoolyard at dusk, eggshell fragments in her pocket etched with verses leading to the next, a shepherd's horn silent in the fold. The convergence neared, Carver's limp echoing the crooked path. Chapter 7. The Wolf's Whispered Lullaby. Moon hung full and luminous over St. Mary Mead, bathing the fields in a silvery glow that turned the hedgerows into spectral guardians. 6 shadows now stretched long in the village's memory. Sir Reginald, Blackwood's contorted form, Daphne Grimsby's poisoned repose, Jasper Tolliver's cleaved silence, Evelyn Hartley's tart-strewn grave, Elias Reed's discordant collapse, and Desmond Quill's shattered perch, each a stanza in a killer's grim lullaby, bound by nursery verses that mocked the living. Miss Jane Marple, gazing from her bedroom window at Jones' estate, traced the constellations with a thoughtful finger. Finch's confession had netted an accomplice, but Carver, the limping phantom from Londoney, eluded the county police. His grudge against the Blackwood legacy fueling the carnage. Tommy's role as unwitting pawn had cracked the facade. Yet the rhymes persisted, a siren's call to the next verse. Over a breakfast of kedgeree and strong coffee, Raymond West folded his newspaper with a snap. Aunt Jane, the papers are calling. It, the rhyme reaper. Finch is singing like a canary in custody, implicating Carver in every death. Surely the net's closing. Miss Marple's needles clicked, a measured response. Nets have holes, Raymond. Carver's limp echoes the crooked man, his web spun from old swindles. But the verses shift next might be Little Boy Blue, a shepherd lost among his sheep. I've heard the local farmer, Mr. Silas Meadow, complaining of prowlers near his fold. Joan, sketching the moonlit landscape from memory, looked up sharply. Silas, he's the village shepherd, tends the flock on the outskirts. He judged the wool spinning at the fat Elias played a jig for it. Silas mentioned a land dispute with Quill, over school boundaries encroaching on his pasture. The thread tugged. Miss Marple set aside her knitting and ventured to Meadows Farm, a rambling spread of stone barns and grazing fields where sheep bleated like distant bells. The air carried the earthy temps of wool and hay, mingled with a faint, acrid undernote. That set her instincts alight. Silas Meadow, a weathered man with a shepherd's crook in hand and a horn slung at his belt, greeted her from the gate. His eyes, shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat, held a flicker of wariness. Miss Marple, come to count my sheep, he rumbled, his voice like gravel underfoot. Village is jumpy as a lamb in a storm. Heard about Quillpaw, fool, perched too high. She smiled disarmingly. Counting sheep might help us all sleep better. Mr. Meadow, tell me, have you received any peculiar messages lately? Silas hesitated, then fished a crumpled note from his pocket. The script was unmistakable. Come, blow your horn, the sheep are in the meadow, but the wolf howls tonight. He crumpled it further. Found it nailed to the barn door yesterday. Thought it a prank, but with the killings... ... Double quotes. Miss Marple's gaze sharpened. Little Boy Blue, she murmured. A warning, perhaps. Your dispute with Quill resolved now. Silas snorted. Resolved in death. He wanted my land for school expansion, claimed inheritance rights from Blackwood's old deeds. But I've papers proving otherwise. Family legacy. As they walked the fields, sheep parting like clouds, a howl pierced the morning-year human cry, raw and desperate. It came from the sheepfold, a fenced enclosure under ancient oaks. Rushing forward, they found Silas's assistant, young Ben, kneeling beside a mangled form. Silas Meadow lay sprawled in the pen, his body torn as if by savage claws, blood soaking the earth. His shepherd's horn lay forgotten at his side, untouched, while the sheep huddled in a corner, their eyes wide with primal fear. Claw marks raked his chest, but Miss Marple noted their uniformity, too precise for a wild beast. Constable Poke arrived on horseback, his face ashen under the brim of his helmet. "Miss Marple, this is barbaric, mauled by wolves. But there are none in these parts since the old days." She knelt carefully, examining the wounds. "Not wolves, Constable. These marks are from a garden rake, perhaps disguised as claws. And look, fibers, caught in his nails, coarse wool, but dyed unnaturally red. Nearby, scratched in the dirt, the boy sleeps, the wolf feasts." Poke rubbed his chin. Another rhyme. Meadow was vocal at the fete about Carver. He claimed to have seen the limper skulking near Blackwood Hall weeks ago. Motive. The farm became a hive of inquiry as villagers trickled in, drawn by the news. Miss Marple gathered them in the barn, where bales of hay served as seats and the scent of livestock hung heavy. Clara Tuttle arrived with a flask of tea, her hands steady despite the tremor in her voice. Silas was at the inn 2 nights ago, boasting about his inheritance papers. Said they'd proved the Blackwood swindle was bigger than we knew involved. Quill and even the vicar in minor roles. Reverend Hale, overhearing, flushed. "Minor." Silas exaggerated. "I merely witnessed a document years ago, nothing illicit. But he threatened to expose it if I didn't back his land claim." Mrs. Pritchard, clutching a bouquet of wildflowers, as if for a grave, added, "And Silas argued with Hargrove at the Milver water rights flooding his fields. Hargrove shouted he'd rake him over the coals. Mr. Hargrove, present with flour-dusted boots, bristled. Words, nothing more. I was home last night, tallying sacks with my boy. Lily, the inn's cook, hovered at the edge, her eyes downcast. Mr. Meadow was kind, gave me wool for knitting, but he mentioned a call from London, someone demanding his papers." Miss Marple's mind wove the strands, the inheritance papers, key to unravelling the Blackwood fraud that birthed Carver's vengeance. She requested to see them, and Ben, the assistant, fetched a locked chest from the farmhouse. Inside, yellowed. Deeds revealed forgeries, not just Quill's hand, but signatures from Hale, Tolliver's father, and even a young Pritchett as witness. "These tile victims," Miss Marple said softly. Silas held the proof Carver craves to reclaim stolen lands, or fortunes. As afternoon shadows lengthened, Miss Marple walked the fields with Pock, noting trampled grass leading to the woods, a trail of boot prints with a dragged heel, suggesting a limp. "Carver was here," Pock muttered, "but the mauling too brutal for one man." "Assisted, perhaps," she replied, spotting a discarded rake in the underbrush, its tines bent and bloodied. Fibers on it matched the red wool from Silas's wounds, wool from Mrs. Pritchett's prize scarf, seen at the fete. Confronted at her cottage, Mrs. Pritchett crumbled like dry soil. "I didn't kill him. The scarf went missing yesterday. From my line, Silas knew my family's role in the swindle. He hinted at blackmail." Miss Marple patted her hand. "Blackmail seems a theme, dear. But your scarf was planted, like so many clues." Evening brought a fireside gathering at the West Estate, the hearth crackling like whispered secrets. Jones stoked the fire as Miss Marple assembled the pieces before. The group, Poke, Hale, Hargrove, Clara, and Lily. Raymond poured sherry, his skepticism softened by the mounting evidence. Silas's death resolves the land dispute, Miss Marple began, her voice steady. His papers passed to Ben, his nephew, who vows to honour the claims, returning parcels to those swindled, including Carver's kin. But the mauling was staged to evoke the wolf, hiding a simpler truth, poisoned first in his evening ale, weakening him for the rake's assault. Lily gasped, poison, like Miss Grimsby and Elias. Precisely, Miss Marple nodded. Traces in his horn used as a flask. The killer knew. His habits. Accusations swirled. Hargrove admitted diverting water to spite Silas, but swore he mended fences days ago. Hale confessed witnessing the forgeries under duress. Clara revealed Silas's tab at the inn, forgiven posthumously. Ben, invited last, fidgeted by the mantel. Uncle Silas raised me after my parents' ruin in the swindle. He said Carver contacted him, offered a buyout. Silas refused, called him a wolf in sheep's clothing. Miss Marple's gaze pierced. And you, Ben, you inherit now. Convenient. Ben paled. I was in the far field last night, tending a lame away. Ask the vet he stopped by. The vet, summoned by phone, confirmed it. Miss Marple sighed inwardly. The net tightened around Carver, but his elusiveness gnawed. A search of the farmhouse yielded a hidden letter. The wolf claims his due. Surrender the papers or sleep eternal. Postmarked London, scented with pipe. Tobacco finches blend, but Carver's hand. As the group dispersed, the village sighed in tentative relief. Silas's inheritance papers, publicly read at the church, settled old disputes. Land returned to Hargrove's mill, a plot to the inn, easing. Grudges like balm on wounds. The flock's panic quelled. Justice served in death's wake. St. Mary Mead clung to this mending, lanterns glowing against the night. Yet Miss Marple lingered by the fire, the letter in hand. The wolf's howl echoed unresolved, threads converging. On a final reckoning, Carver's limp led to the vicarage, perhaps, where all verses met. Outside, the moon waned, whispering of climaxes yet to come. Chapter 8. The rhyme's final reckoning broke over St. Mary Mead with a crisp clarity, the kind that follows a tempestuous night, washing away the moon's haunting glow and the echoes of Silas Meadows' brutal end. 7 souls had been claimed. In the killer's macabre symphony, Sir Reginald Blackwood's twisted path, Daphne Grimsby's webby snare, Jasper Tolliver's hushed chime, Evelyn Hartley's pilfered delicacies, Elias Reed's discordant bow, Desmond Quill's fractured throne, and ravaged fold. Each verse a breadcrumb leading to this crescendo. With Carver, the limping spectre from London's underbelly, the heart of the storm. His vengeance rooted in the Blackwood family's ancient fraud. Yet Miss Jane Marple, sipping chamomile tea, in Joan's sun-dappled conservatory, sensed the finale brewing. Finch and Tommy's confessions had peeled back layers, but the puppeteer's hand remained gloved, pulling strings from within the villager's own folds. Joan, arranging fresh-cut dahlias in a vase, glanced at her aunt with concern. Aunt Jane, the county detectives arrived at dawn, scouring the woods for Carver. His limp tracks from Silas's farm lead nowhere, vanished like mist. Is it over? Miss Marple set her cup down gently, her eyes distant yet piercing. Over. Not until the last rhyme fades, dear. The verses circle back, intertwining like vines on the vicarage walls. Reverend Hale has called a gathering there tonight to pray for the fallen and seek communal healing. But I suspect it will unveil more than solace. Raymond, entering with the Morning Post, waved a telegram from the county office. Carver's real name is Jacob Blackwood, Sir Reginald's illegitimate half-brother, disowned and ruined in the swindle. He's been cited in London, but alibis place him there during Silas's murder. An accomplice here, then. The revelation ignited Miss Marple's resolve. She spent the morning retracing steps, visiting each crime scene in quiet reflection. At the Crooked Mile, a forgotten glove emerged from the underbrush monogrammed JB, but frayed as if worn by another. In Daphne's parlour, a lavender sachet matched one from the vicarage sewing circle. Tolliver's alley yielded a buttonhole thread, crimson like the vicar's vestments. Piece by piece, the mosaic formed not Carver alone, but a duo, one distant schemer and one intimate betrayer by afternoon. Miss Marple arrived at the vicarage, a serene stone edifice nestled amid blooming asters and the soft coo of doves. Reverend Hale welcomed her into his study, shelves lined with leather-bound tomes and a desk cluttered with sermon notes. His hands trembled as he poured sherry. "Miss Marple, your presence is a bomb. The village fracture suspicions, poison every glance. Tonight's vigil must mend us." She accepted the glass, her gaze lingering on a nursery rhyme book peeking from his drawer pages, dog-eared at familiar verses. Mend, indeed, Reverend. But first, truth must out. Tell me, did you know Jacob Blackwood Carver as a boy? Perhaps during your early ministry in London? Hale's face blanched, his clerical collar suddenly tight. A boy, I counselled many lost souls. If he's the half-brother, then yes, I tried to mediate the family rift, but failed. Why dredge this now? Because, Miss Marple said softly, the rhymes aren't mere taunts, they're confessions. Each victim played a role in the swindle witnesses. Forgers, beneficiaries. You signed off on a deed, didn't you? A youthful indiscretion, perhaps coerced. Hale slumped into his chair, the sherry untouched. Coerced by Blackwood Senior, yes. I was young, indebted. Jacob suffered most cast out, his inheritance stolen. He contacted me months ago, begging for the original papers. I refused, fearing scandal. But I didn't kill. A knock interrupted. Constable Pock, bearing news. "Miss Marple, we've nabbed Carver at the train station. He claims innocence in the murders. Says he only sent threats and funds. Insists a faithful shepherd carried out the deeds." The words hung like incense smoke. Miss Marple's mind raced. Shepherd not Silas, but Hale, the spiritual guide of the flock. "Reverend, your alibi's prayers alone in the study during each crime. And the crimson thread, the lavender, the gloval traces leading here." Hale rose, his voice steady but eyes wild. "Absurd. I am a man of God. God and vengeance make uneasy bedfellows," Miss Marple countered. "Jacob was your protege. Wasn't he? You saw him as the son you never had, ruined by the village's greed. The rhymes your childhood comfort twisted into justice." As evening descended, the vicarage filled with villagers. Clara Tuttle with her steadfast gaze, Mr. Hargrove and his family, Mrs. Pritchett clutching her rosary, Lily wide-eyed, and even Ben from the farm, inheritance papers in hand. Joan and Raymond flanked Miss Marple, the room aglow with candlelight that danced shadows across faces etched with anticipation. Polk stationed officers at the doors, Carver in cuffs at the back, his limp pronounced under restraint. Reverend Hale stood at the pulpit-like dais, his sermon on forgiveness faltering as Miss Marple rose. "Friends, we gather for closure, but secrets fester like untended wounds. The killer walks among us, not Carver alone, but his ally, Reverend Hale, gasps rippled like waves. Hale gripped the lectern, knuckles white. Lies, I offered sanctuary. Miss Marple's voice cut through, calm as a brook. Sanctuary turned to slaughter. You counseled Jacob in his youth, harbored his bitterness. When he returned, broke and vengeful, you saw a chance for redemption, yours and his swindle's survivors. Blackwood, the heir, Grimsby, the recorder, Tolliver, the supplier, Hartley, the notary, Reed, the messenger, Quill, the forger, Meadow, the claimant. Each silenced with a rhyme from your treasured book. She produced the nursery tome from his study, pages marked with victim names. You planted clues to frame Carver, but overreached the glove from his London visit, worn by you. Lavender from your garden, threads from your robes. Alibis, solitary prayers, but Lily saw you slip out the back during Tolliver's death, and Ben noted your shadow near the fold. Lily nodded tearfully. I thought it was a ghost. Hale's facade cracked, his shoulders sagging. They deserved it, Blackwood's. Clan ruined Jacob, left him to rot. I was complicit, silent. The rhymes, a child's innocence, reclaiming justice. I posed Blackwood, poisoned Grimsby with her own distrust, cleaved Tolliver amid his greed, staged Hartley's theft to mirror her pilfering soul, laced Reed's bow with his own venomous secrets, pushed Quill from his hypocritical height, and raked Meadow like the wolf he was, hoarding lands stolen from the poor. Carver, chains rattling, spoke hoarsely. I sent money, notes, but not murder. Hale twisted my pain into this horror. Revelations cascaded. Hale's midnight walks, disguised limp from an old injury feigned anew. Forged invitations and planted evidence, all to orchestrate a purge. Hargrove confessed his water diversion was Hale's suggestion, sowing discord. Pritchard admitted Hal borrowed her scarf for charity, used in the staging. Clara revealed overdue tithes, forgiven in exchange for silence on his late-night absences. Polk stepped forward, cuffs ready. Reverend, it's over. Justice not, vengeance prevails, Hale's. Eyes met Miss Marple's, a flicker of regret. I sought to right wrongs, but birthed more. Forgive me. As officers led him away under the starlit skies, the village exhaled, the weight lifting like fog at dawn. Carver, cleared of direct killings, but charged with conspiracy, followed in a separate wagon, his limp a final echo of the crooked path in the vicarage garden. Miss Marple lingered with Joan and Raymond, the air sweet with night-blooming jasmine. Fragility of innocence, indeed, she mused. Hale's faith warped by guilt, Carver's rage fanned by loss. But St. Mary Mead endorsed threads mended, truths unveiled. Joan hugged her aunt. You saw what we missed, Aunt Jane. The rhymes end here. Raymond chuckled softly. No loose ends, then. Save for a new vicar. Miss Marple smiled, gazing at the stars. None, dear. Only the quiet triumph of truth, restoring peace to our little corner. The village slumbered that night, doors unbolted. For the first time in weeks, the nursery echoes silenced forever. In the morning, church bells rang clear and true, a melody of renewal.